first random thought, it's the sense of urgency. Why climate change? And I actually intentionally left it there in orange with the orange background. I'm pretty sure that that's more annoying to you that you cannot read than the actual consequences of climate change. So what it says there is that every day we see something happening around the world. Flooding, bushfires, other climatic events, and we start to feel that that's very normal, and we don't feel that we should be worried about this. In all my classes, I talked about how I'm Mexican, and that actually shapes a lot of how I deal with the world, how I understand people affected by things, particularly around climate change. Living in Australia, of course, puts it in another dimension as well. And then I start talking about how climate change is not really about the environment, but it's really about politics and economics. That's my random thought. How can we designers step outside of design and be more interested in that? It's not to say that now we have to do policy. I think that's one of the criticisms at the end of the semester, last semester. If we are creating, Ross said that, are we creating researchers or policymakers? We are not, but we do need to care about those things. If we don't understand climate change from those two perspectives, I think we are missing a lot of the sense of urgency. The other thing around the sense of urgency is to try to step out from that mindset of extractivism. How can we change that perspective when we practice design? That these are not resources for us to use, but this is part of nature. And then again, Oli was talking about how can we design within nature, and again, how do we step away from that mindset? So that was the first random thought. The second one is critical and accountable. So the question is, how can we design, and that's what Chris was saying about my practice, and we were discussing before all the talks started. How do I identify my practice? Am I an industrial designer, service designer, degrowing designer? So this is the question. How can we design desirable futures, both by feeling agency of the practice of design, but also responsibility? How can we actually do that? So one of the things that at the moment I'm really interested in, I guess, learning a lot more, it's a proposition from Arturo Escobar, which is a theoretical framework that is called pluriversal design. This framework comes from a lot of indigenous knowledge. So he's kind of packaging in a way that for us is easier to understand, but actually the knowledge comes from there. So some of the aspects that are mentioned there is understanding diverse epistemologies and ontologies, so it's different ways of doing and being. Relationality, so Oli already talked a little bit about that, and interdependence, designing within the nature ecosystem. Autonomy and self-determination, so how we actually move away from that position of I'm the expert because I'm designer, and actually acknowledging that communities hold the expertise on their actual situation. Being holistic and context-specific, this point is the one that at the moment, the next point is the one that I'm really passionate about. Resisting and dismantling colonial structures and mindset through design practices. How can we actually do that? That's something that at the moment I'm kind of exploring. And care and responsibility. So this one actually has a mistake that I realized later. So the diverse epistemologies and ontologies, so obviously multiple ways of knowing, epistemologies, but multiple ways of doing, that's ontologies. So recognizing that there's different ways of doing things, that there's not just one way, that there's no toolkit, that there's no framework that it's going to work, that we actually need to really base it on context. Sorry. The other thing that as well is really important, that framework of relationality. This is something that in the last studio in the collective imaginary, but also as well in the sociable designer, we talked about how do we position ourselves not as a human-centered practice, but actually how do we understand that relationality. So I found this quote in a paper as well that we use in the studios, that the question is, how are a river and a mountain similar? And the answer is, they both are part of nature. But when we think about relationality and interdependence, we actually understand that the river flows down from the mountain, and that's how they are similar. So then that's talking about the relationality and the interdependence. So this diagram from pause and effect, they actually are really good in trying to tell us how can we move away from human-centered design. Last semester in the sociable designer, we talked a lot about this, moving away from human-centered, and how can we start thinking about relational design. And again, we need to take step by step, but that's, I guess, where we want to go. It's an important shift in mindset. Has to do a lot with politics, and it has to do a lot with economics. I mentioned this before already, the autonomy and the self-determination. So understanding that we designers are not the experts in a situation, that it's communities, and how we understand that when we kind of come to a particular project or context. Care and responsibility, this is a really important one. How can we build cultures of care about what we design, but as well about something that lasts for longer? So this actually talks about a little bit about repairability. So I also found this book that I found really interesting, that it's about politics and climate change. It's called It's Not That Radical, Climate Action to Transform Our World. And in there it says, we live in an economic system that prioritizes profit above everything else, leading to harmful and oppressive practices that significantly contribute to the climate crisis and environmental damage, which is often downplayed for the public. This is a discussion that I have with a lot of people about how we always talk about climate change and we always talk about individual responsibility, and we really never properly talked about collective responsibility when we talk about organizations that actually have a lot of power and a lot of impact in their practices, and that's, I feel, what we should really be talking about if we really want to understand what climate change consequences are. One of the things that we use as a practice, particularly in the collective imaginary studio, was radical imagination. And what does it actually mean in terms of the practice of design? So I also find this quote that I really like, that was, can you imagine a world where nature is understood as full relatives, not resources, and that's what I was mentioning before, where inalienable rights are balanced with inalienable responsibilities, and where wealth itself is measured not by the resource ownership or control, but by the number of good relationships we maintain in the complex and diverse life systems of this blue-green planet. And this person was saying that they can. But again, that comes with a major mind shift in the way we think about our relationships with nature. So that was the second random thought. The last one is being hopeful. I'm bringing some examples of students that I have worked with and that generously allow me to show that work in this presentation. So the first project is SOL, which is enable women to recycle plastic safely. This project is from a major project from last semester from Joanna Pons. And in this project, Joanna actually came with this position of, I want to design a solution for the Solomon Islands about recycling plastic. And the position was like, I am kind of the expert and I know what the solution should be. And the challenge was to try to step back, reposition what is the role of design in that particular situation, understanding the context, engaging with the right stakeholders. This was a project that was through the RMIT Urban Center's research, and they did have relationships with this particular group, Social Change Girls Club. And then the struggle of coming from this practice of, I know what I'm going to do, to then move into what design actually could do, and what was actually her role. So then what she proposed was a workshop and a set of resources that allow the girls to make their own processes according to the knowledge that they have, according to the values that they have, and just facilitating how they decide to do that transition from already practicing some circular economy processes, but doing it in a health way. The other thing as well that Joanna realized was that before even trying to say that we're moving completely through circular economy practice, what are the important things here? It's not just about that process, but about the health of people doing it, and that was kind of a major shift as well into what design can do. Using low tech as well, trying to not think that we always have to come up with these really complicated technologies, particularly in a context where one of the main challenges was road infrastructure. That's why they didn't have proper waste recycling systems. The next project is not an MD project, it's an honors project from industrial design, but it comes as well with these ideas of repositioning the role of design. So this project is called Material Relations. This student called Jamie, she worked in a consultancy, sustainability consultancy. And when she started her honors project, she was really worried about being in the sustainability industry, but not being able to really criticize the industry. Being in that industry as such was already starting to be problematic to her. And when she started having or trying to have these conversations with her colleagues, she found that she couldn't, and then find kind of a little bit of a paradigm thinking, well, we are in sustainability and we're meant to be kind of critical, but at the same time, we cannot be critical, we cannot have those conversations. So she started with that questions. Do materials have agency, or can materials have agency? So she created this artifact, which is kind of a metaphor of the lithium battery. She was trying to criticize the culture of extractivism in Australia, particularly critical minerals, and how by creating this artifact, she was kind of giving some sort of agency to the material. She recorded the vibrations of extracting the minerals, and then she put a system in there. When you press the buttons, there was vibration and there was a light. And this artifact was used in a co-design workshop to create a design manifesto with her colleagues. And then she created some sort of blueprint to recreate this workshop again in a different setting when the challenge was to have those difficult or critical conversations. There was a starting kind of talk started for those complex conversations. The third project, it's from Atarba, Paulina, and Ashi. Ashi graduated last semester, but Atarba is here. And the project is called Design to the Dump and Planned Obsolescence. With this one as well, the challenge was, how do we create something in the collective imaginary studio, which was challenging an issue of climate change. And one of the things that they found when they were really interested in the right to repair, they actually never heard about the right to repair and started to investigate a lot of the work from John Gertzakis and a lot of the conversations that are being had at the national level, and how long has it taken that conversation, and looking at case studies from France or Canada or other countries where this conversation has gone a longer way. So I guess the shock there was like, they wanted to design a durable electronic product, and then started realizing that it was about money, it was about competition, it was about marketing, a lot of other things. So then they felt a sense of hopelessness. But then, kind of talking to some stakeholders, they decided to create this speculative packaging, where they were mocking the marketing strategies that are used in e-products. They're saying all these great things that products do, and products that you can buy for $10 or $15 in Kmart, Target, that kind of thing. So the front part of the project was called Design for the Dump. So being very blunt about you are buying a product that is going to end up in the dump. It costs you $10, but that's exactly what it's going to be. And the back of the packaging was, I guess, the proposal of having an index of repairability in the packaging and really pushing for accountability of manufacturers. So once you unfold the packaging, you could see a series of unethical practices that meant to bring awareness with consumers. So these are the labels that you started unfolding the packaging, and then, as you can see, for example, messages like repairing is luxury, or this product is meant not to be intentionally not repairable, or we extract precious metals and we don't even recover them. So then that was kind of a conversation started. In the final presentation of this project, conversations about how could this be a tool for stakeholders at that national level to start kind of thinking that this is something that we really need to kind of be able to talk about, put accountability to manufacturers, and as well getting people that are making these decisions to get on with, I guess, the program. The last project, it's a project where, as well, Simon was one of the stakeholders that the student consulted. This is called Vessel, and it's a circular food delivery system. This project was really, I guess, interesting from the perspective that the student is Mika. The student wanted to create reusable packaging for when you order food from Uber Eats. And he was really kind of shocked about the amount of packaging. However, he was never, at that point, at the beginning of the project, questioning that practice of just ordering food and just kind of unchallenging that, but designing something that was sustainable for that practice. So then the journey that the student had to go through was, okay, so you're going to design something that is going to put some remedy to that unsustainable practice, but at the same time, you will be encouraging the unsustainable practice of just ordering food. So then his project, instead of being a project where this goes from using reusable packaging and kind of perpetuating this practice of ordering food, was different. I will talk about that in a moment, but the proposition was designed for reusability, looking at a packaging system that was managed by the owners of the restaurants. The business model was a deposit scheme for returning the packaging. The business model as well was the licensing of the packaging, so the money was not being made in the actual packaging, but the system of using that in a very localized area in Melbourne City, so really understanding where, I guess, the consumption of this packaging is. And using containers, returnable containers, so bins in the street. The other challenge that Mika had was that he was very reluctant to engage with stakeholders, so he really didn't understand why the practice of design really involves a multidisciplinary approach. So when he was pushed to contact Simon Lockery, there's a person that already does this, the licensing, and talking to that person, to the City Melbourne Council, he got so much insight that this project took a little bit of a different level. He talked to people in the Department of Environment as well. So it was really comprehensive in the stakeholder engagement, that at the end what he proposed was a system that the idea was that, yes, you start with the ordering food, but the progression was that you go back to the restaurant to eat at the restaurant. So the system was about that. So you start kind of using the reusable container, but thinking that we should be going back to restaurants, like particularly now that I guess COVID is not happening there. So he tested this with Melbourne City Council, with the Department of Energy and as well with Simon. So I was kind of really pleased to see that transition in the mindset. So that was the last random thought. Sense of urgency, critical and accountable, being hopeful. So now I put it back to you. What are your random thoughts about the practice of design? Thank you.